Study after study has found overwhelming disparities in who is impacted by the American criminal justice system. Perhaps you've heard some of these. Black men are 6 times more likely to be incarcerated than white men. On the road, minorities are more likely to be stopped and searched than whites. But are these disparities evidence of racial bias? We often turn to data for a semblance of truth, for rigor, objectivity. I love data. It can reveal patterns, tell stories, and at their very core, data can confirm or challenge our theories. But when it comes to racial bias, definitive answers have been hard to come by. Although data initiatives have been sweeping the country, drawbacks of current approaches have limited our ability to have an informed discussion, sometimes contributing more confusion rather than clarity. Here's one example. One might argue that the higher search rates for minorities are due to racial bias. The reality of policing is that officers tend to be deployed in high crime areas, areas that tend to be predominantly Black and Hispanic. So a common counter-argument is that the elevated search rates we see are simply a result of effective policing. How can we move forward and propose solutions if we can't accurately identify or measure the very thing we're trying to address, racial bias? Our team at Stanford has been working on methods to overcome some of the current limitations. But I first want to show you why it's so difficult to measure racial bias. Let's think of traffic stops. Now, in order to identify bias, we would need to know whether an officer would, given 2 drivers in otherwise identical contexts, react differently when one is white and the other is not. Now, obviously, this is impossible. So what can we do? Well, the most commonly used test to measure racial bias is known as the outcome test. It compares the search success rate, or hit rate, among race groups. What's a hit? Well, a hit is when an officer searches a car and finds contraband, that is, something illegal. So it's kind of like a home run for the officer. The idea is if searches of minorities turn up contraband 10% of the time, whereas searches of whites turn up contraband 90% of the time, then this suggests officers are searching minorities on the basis of less evidence than whites. Now, this test sounds very reasonable, right? But it turns out it has a well-known limitation. And to see this, let's think about what happens during a traffic stop. So here's your typical driver. During the course of the stop, the officer has discretion to search. And they have discretion to search if they have sufficient reason to believe the driver is carrying contraband. So they observe the demographics of the driver, the time of day, whether it's a dangerous neighborhood, and they look for clues, whether the driver is acting nervous or evasive, if there's any odors in the car, more factors than we can ever hope to measure. And in order to make their decision, we imagine they distill all this information down into a single number, which represents their subjective estimate that the driver is going to possess contraband. Now, if their estimate is sufficiently high, they're going to conduct a search. That's a pretty suspicious-looking driver, right? So now imagine we had this information for all drivers. Then we could order the drivers in increasing order of suspicion. We'd expect that above a certain threshold of suspicion, all drivers would be searched. Now, say 2 out of the 4 searches were successful, the hit rate would be 1/2. Okay, so everyone with me so far? Now, let's see how the outcome test can fail. So here we have 2 race groups, green and blue. The hit rates are equal, indicating that the outcome test does not find evidence of bias. But notice that the least suspicious green driver that was searched had an estimated 25% chance of having contraband, whereas the least suspicious blue driver that was searched had an estimated 51% chance. So these green drivers would not have been searched had they been blue. The lower threshold for green suggests that police require less evidence when searching green drivers. So what we actually want to measure are the search thresholds themselves. The only problem is we can't observe them. We can only observe the hit rates. So we're left with a flawed metric to measure one of the most invasive actions police can take, to search someone. It's like we're trying to diagnose a patient with unreliable tests using miscalibrated equipment. So in order to address this problem, our team at Stanford developed a mathematical model to determine whether searches are consistently effective. Given the number of stops, searches, and hits, we can infer the search thresholds being used by a department for each race group. We applied the test to 4.5 million stops in North Carolina. Each point here is a department. The x-axis is the white threshold, and the y-axis is the minority threshold. So points below the line indicate that thresholds for minorities are consistently lower across the largest 100 departments in the state. Now, we've tested and ruled out legitimate reasons why thresholds might vary, such as time of day, year, or policy changes. And crucially, we cannot determine whether the lower thresholds are due to discrimination or implicit bias or some other unknown factor. But the results do suggest there are some striking irregularities in how search decisions are made. We must also be cognizant that the data we choose to collect and the models we build are laden with values. The way we choose to discretize and record the world around us will determine the stories our data will be able to tell. And models are built on assumptions, ones that we must continuously test and perfect. But the very fact that we lack perfect tools today is all the more reason to strive for rigor. If we are to ever reach a common ground, we must have the courage to ask some uncomfortable questions. Perhaps find some uncomfortable answers, and start all over again when our solutions don't work. Police undoubtedly have a tough job. There's a high cost to searching someone innocent, the lack of trust. And there's a high cost to not searching someone who's potentially dangerous, unsafe communities, and higher crime. So Robert Peel, who's commonly regarded as the father of modern policing, envisioned a society where the bond between police and the communities they served was so strong that it would be like they were one and the same. And until the day our data and our narratives will speak of Peel's vision, we mustn't stop working.